You can't break free from self-defeating patterns until you confront the lies you've mistaken for a fact. And you can't outgrow who you're meant to be until you let go of who you used to be. That's what this podcast is about, giving you the tools and courage to dismantle limiting beliefs, shed outdated identities, and rewrite the narrative that's been holding you back. This podcast is your invitation to reinvent yourself. Give yourself permission to change. Give yourself the power to become someone new. Rewrite your story. I'm your host, Ruth M. Welcome to Loved and Free Podcast. It's said that time heals all wounds. But time is also a revealer of wounds. In episode 1, we saw how our experiences shape us, and I delved into the weight of pain on the enslaved Israelites, which, if juxtaposed with our lives, reflects the same message. We can't ignore or underestimate our experiences. Exodus 6:9 says, "They did not listen to Moses," that's the Israelites, "because of their broken spirit and their cruel bondage." The Hebrew term for this is kotzaruach. Pardon me if I've butchered that word, which has a very literal meaning. Shortness of breath, a constriction of spirit. It's not ingratitude, it's not stubbornness, it's the state of a chest so crushed by the weight of bondage that it cannot draw in the fast, terrifying air of promise. The lungs are too scared to breathe hope. Kotzaruach describes a person whose soul has been so crushed they can no longer expand to receive hope, even when hope is standing right in front of them. We don't have to be religious to see ourselves in that sentence. We don't have to know anything about sacred texts to recognize what a broken spirit feels like. Because kotzaruach is not a precept of theology. It is a precise, ancient diagnosis of a profoundly modern condition. It is the breath you cannot catch even after the crisis is over. It is the invisible chain that still clanks against your ankle long after you have walked out of the room where you were hurt. You have to understand something about a soul that has been starved, beaten, and terrorized for generations. The mind might accept the fact of the rescue, but the body keeps score in a language deeper than words. To understand this, we'll have to talk about what trauma actually is, not just the ordinary dictionary definition, but what it does to a human body and mind over time. We have to look unflinchingly at how the things we go through today create our own Egypts, our broken spirits, and how we often remain in bondage, even when we think we are free. But clinically, psychologically, and humanly, trauma is not the event itself. It is the lasting injury left by an overwhelming experience that the mind and body could not process at the time. It is a wound that changes the nervous system. Think of a physical wound that never properly healed. The skin closed over dirt and debris, and now it festers underneath, tender to the touch, prone to infection, and constantly sending pain signals to the brain. Psychological trauma is the same, but the debris is made of memory, terror, helplessness, and betrayal. The event is over, but the alarm system in the body never turned off. The brain, in an attempt to keep you safe, has rewired itself for perpetual threat and detection. Trauma lives in the body. The survivor might flinch at a raised voice years after leaving the violent household. They might feel an unexplainable wave of nausea when they smell a particular cologne or hear the footsteps on a certain kind of floor. Their heart might race when they need to speak up in a meeting because their childhood taught them that visibility meant punishment. These are not character flaws or dramatic overreactions. They are the body's memory. doing exactly what it was trained to do, survive. This is the biology of a broken spirit. This is the physical architecture of causal work. The shortness of breath is not just a metaphor. Trauma survivors often have chronically shallow breathing, a permanent activated flight or fight response that restricts the diaphragm. The body is braced for a blow that finished years ago. The spirit, that innermost sense of self, dignity, and possibility, has been curled into a protective ball, and it takes enormous energy to just keep it there. You don't need to be a slave in a literal brickyard to have your spirit systematically crushed. The dynamics of oppression and dehumanization are replayable in an infinite number of settings. The human spirit is tender. It does not take a row to sky it. It takes an environment where you're powerless, where your reality is denied, and where the stress is unrelenting. Consider a childhood home where love was conditional on performance, where silence was the only safe strategy, where you learned to read the micro-expressions of a volatile parent with the same hypervigilance a prey animal uses to watch for predators. The threat of emotional annihilation or physical taught you that you were fundamentally flawed, that your needs were a burden, that you are allowed to exist only if you made yourself small and useful. That is an Egypt. You live at some point, but home lives inside you forever. Consider the workplace that grinds you into a numb exhaustion, where a boss uses public humiliation as a management tool, where your value is reduced to a spreadsheet cell, and where you're made to feel that you're lucky to have the job. So you swallow your dignity every day until you can no longer taste your own self-respect. That is an Egypt. Consider the relationship that started as a fairy tale and gradually became a prison of criticism, isolation, gaslighting, and control, where you are told daily and in 1,000 small ways that you are crazy, that you are the problem, that no one else would ever want you. The person who was supposed to love you systemically dismantled your sense of reality. You finally get out, but the voice in your head that calls you worthless is still theirs, and you have no idea how to trust your own judgment anymore. That's an Egypt. Consider the sudden catastrophes too, the diagnosis that defined your future in a sentence, the accident that stole your mobility or your memory, the phone call that told you the person you love most was gone. In an instant, the map of the world you held in your mind was shredded. The spirit can shatter just as completely from acute shock or from chronic oppression. And consider the smaller invisible cruelties of ordinary life that accumulate silently. The constant financial precarity that makes every unexpected bill a crisis. The loneliness of a society where you have 1,000 online connections, but no one who will hold your hand when you cry. The slow erosion of dreams deferred until you no longer remember what hope felt like. You are not in literal chains, but your spirit is bent or gasping. The ancient Israelites walked through a sea on dry ground. They were physically out of Egypt. They should have been elated, dancing, full of faith. Instead, a few days into their journey, they began to panic. They longed to go back. They romanticized the place of the enslavement, reminiscing about the food they ate there. They built idols and raged and wept and sabotaged their own future. They were free, but they were not well. Their shortness of spirit made freedom unbearable. This is the central heartbreaking truth that the concept of causal work forces us to face. Liberation is not the same thing as healing. Leaving that place of pain is not the same as being free from the effects of pain. You can walk out of Egypt, but Egypt will ride along inside your chest, whispering its old familiar threats unless something deeper happens. This is the diabolical success of trauma. The shackles of our experiences appear in our lives in ways that are often invisible to outsiders and sometimes invisible even to ourselves. They shape our relationships, our ambitions, our nervous systems, and our deepest sense of identity. We wonder why we keep sabotaging good things, why we can't trust kind people, why we feel profoundly unsafe in peaceful moments, why our body is falling apart with inexplicable pain or fatigue. We call ourselves ungrateful, weak, or crazy. But what is actually happening is that the old survival software is still running, and it's incompatible with the new operating system of freedom. With that said, are you truly free?